Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about what I consider to be some of the best tools to build the deadlift. And I'm not saying these are the only tools you need, and I'm not saying that past a certain threshold I don't have my clients do other stuff. But generally speaking, if your goal is to say to get to a 500 deadlift, and we are trying to do so in a way that doesn't beat the body up, that lets you continue to train everything seriously, and still possibly be physically active outside of your lifting, then this is a very, very good approach, right? Particularly if you're trying to get strong at multiple things, because a lot of heavy deadlifting is not conducive to doing very much total training. And I'm not saying heavy deadlifting can't get you up to 500. What I'm saying is this will do it quickly, and it will do it without it beating you up as much. And it's to really focus on a few things, and it's going to be number one, speed pulls, right? Speed pulls. In a perfect world, you'll do these speed pulls against bands or chains, but not everyone's in a perfect world. And I certainly have mid 500s deadlifters who do not have access to bands or chains, who we still use speed pulls as their primary modality. So the thing is with speed pulls, it's generally doing something like 10 singles, 6 doubles, 8 doubles, things like that, depending upon what we're doing. Usually if you're going to use straight weight, maybe around 60% of your max. In the case of when I'm doing a lot of the band work, it's around 50% of the max, 25% of the max in band tension. Rotating through them. In other words, you might do them conventional sometimes. You might do them sumo sometimes. You might do them off of a small deficit. You might do them off small blocks, depending upon where you seem to be weakest in your deadlifts. And if you do a max pull every now and then, which again, if we're running conjugate, you're going to do, you'll figure out where you're weakest at, right? You'll know where your sticking points are. So what do we mean by picking the right stuff? Well, if you're weaker at the lockouts, doing them off a small deficit will help, right? Particularly against bands. If you're weaker off the floor, doing them off of blocks will help, right? So you would do small block pulls 1 to 2 inches off the floor. That's an example. Or you could just rotate through the 3. Right? You could rotate through them. And you could do the same sort of stuff with sumo. So again, rotating through different types of speed pulls. And I think the thing that people need to keep in mind is that a sumo speed pull will carry over to your conventional max. This is something I have found to be very true with a lot of my lifters. The only exception is lifters who do not have strong backs. In other words, if a lifter is weak at rows, pull-ups, high pulls, things like that, their conventional will still suffer, even if they get really good with the speed pulls. Which, brings us to some of the other stuff that we'll discuss in this video. But speed pulls, that's your main key. It will teach you to deadlift. It's really easy to recover from. And it will get you used to the pulling mechanics and pulling explosively. And if done correctly, it will actually put hypertrophy on you. It's a more efficient way to get hypertrophy from a pull from the floor than doing heavy deadlifts is. Because again, the stimulus to fatigue involved. And again, you have to pull fast to make it work. But that's your number one key. What else do we want to do? We want to do upper and middle back work. Now in this video, you're just going to see me doing pull-ups. Pull-ups are definitely a very good exercise to help with this. Why? They help with grip a lot, right? A lot of your grip training can come from just doing pull-ups and chin-ups. Great for your grip, particularly if you have to deal with a thicker bar at all to do pull-ups on. All right, why pull-ups though? Besides the grip and the forearm, build your lats, build your lower traps. A lot of these muscles that you need, and a lot of times on a conventional deadlift, if you start to stick right around the knee, it's usually either your hamstrings or your lats or both. It's usually what's limiting you, because we need to hypertrophy all these muscles involved. We need to hypertrophy them. All right, this will get it done. Pull-ups are helpful. How about rows, pen leg rows from the floor? Again, we build a little more upper back. It teaches you to learn to get tight when you go to set up a pull. So if you do a pen lay row correctly, it should look like a conventional deadlift setup. So again, pen lay rows. So again, we're back over to back work though. Pen lay rows, phenomenal exercise. In fact, I've told plenty of people out there, if you just get really good at rows and good mornings and speed pulls, you'll probably build a pretty respectable deadlift just off of that before you even start doing any heavy pulling. Or again, we can test our maxes periodically. Again, I wouldn't do a deadlift max more than once every 2 weeks though, for most of you out there. And again, you need to rotate variations. You just need to get used to pulling heavy. But again, that's more for developing maximum strength. All of this is how to build the base to do it with. This is how we build a base to do it. And other upper back work. How about things like hang pulls, high pulls, snatch grip high pulls? Anything that will then work your upper back, works your traps, works your T-spine. So any of this pulling, and I don't even care what combinations you do it, because at a certain point, if you're underdeveloped, it will all carry over. Meaning we could focus on some of those more than others if we have specific weak links. But if you're not an advanced lifter, let's say, again, you're a sub 500 puller, right? You don't pull even 450 yet. Just getting really good at any of those will have that carryover, because they all work the upper and middle back. It's just to different degrees. A lot of the hang pulls and high pulls work more of the upper, less of the middle. They still work it, just like pull-ups work the upper less, pull-ups and chin-ups, and they work the middle more. But they still work the whole thing. And so you're going to see carryover there. And it's going to help. And then last but not least, good mornings. And everyone who follows my channel knows that I'm fanatical about the good morning. It is not an optional exercise. All of my clients do good mornings. They all do them year round. Nobody gets out of them. Anybody who gets on Team Blaha hires me to coach them, you will be doing good mornings, unless we have a medical reason not to, in which case I don't know that I need to be coaching you anyways. Good mornings. Now, I talk a lot about how much the good morning carries over to the squat, because it does. It is arguably the best squat accessory you could possibly do. But the carryover to deadlifts is pretty good. I would not say it is as good, right? The squat carryover is tremendous. The deadlift carryover is good because, again, what are we doing? It's a hip extension exercise that loads the upper and middle back also, right? So again, we were just talking about building that upper back, middle back. So let's say, again, we're dealing with some of the upper back weakness. Good mornings. Let's say you're doing pull-ups instead of the high pulls and stuff. Doing some good mornings, particularly something like a safety bar, will hit a lot of those traps and T-spine really hard. It'll bring that area up. It'll help you there. But the main thing that it does is that it's a heavy hip hinge that we can handle pretty large amounts of volume on. And if we can handle larger amounts of volume, we get hypertrophy. Okay, so the hip hinging is the biggest part, because a deadlift is a hip hinge. It's a really heavy hip hinge that uses the whole body, but it's a hip hinge nonetheless. So again, we start talking about hamstrings, glutes, and to some extent even part of the quad gets used. And some of the quad that gets used is a very similar part of the quad that gets used on the deadlift. Not to the same extent, but if you're also doing any squatting, you've already got that covered. But the hamstrings, the glutes, the low back, these things get worked extremely hard. All of the hip extensors get worked. And those hip extensors are your primary movers on the deadlift. They are the most important thing. The other things matter, and I'm not saying they don't. Like if you develop a weakness in it, it's going to limit your deadlift. But the primary movers are the same. Right? These are what contribute to most of the weight that you can pull, or at least the foundation for it. So again, this is a hypertrophy exercise that builds up the muscles of the deadlift in the posterior chain. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.